morning, Mr. Siddarth, and thank you, my dear friends from BCIC, President Mr. Shekhar, Mr. Jayaraj, Mr. Narasimha Kshatri, Mr. Raju, Mr. Tyagu, Mr. Chandramouli, and many others, all veterans of BCIC. BCIC has done itself quite proud in the last couple of years through the startup awards to begin with, which culminated in the form of what we call as a mentorship clinic. The chief clinical doctor is Sri Jayaraj, who from a bureaucrat has become a doctor now to run this clinic. I am supporting him in some manner, and the startup foray of ours has more than exceeded our expectations so far. While the larger milestones need to be crossed in the years to come, people like you should support us in the best possible way, beginning today. And the second edition of the Startup Award is currently on its anvil and will culminate by about May of 2022 in the form of a summit. With these words, I request Mr. Siddarth, after having formally welcomed you at the beginning itself, to now take over the proceedings. I'm sure the next 30 minutes would be an engrossing session followed by many questions that will pour in from all quarters. And we request you to exercise patience in handling each of these questions. Give us how one should succeed, how we should work together with you, and how we can grow together. Thank you, Mr. Siddarth. Please take over.
Thank you, sir.
Ravindran, before Siddarth opens it, I just want to speak few words
Sure.
on Siddarth, which a lot of people are not aware of it. One of the thoughts that Ravindran had with me was that to invite some of the successful entrepreneurs to the startup clinic. So normally when you go for a startup, it's easily to recognize a technology-based startup or a fintech-based startup who can turn it around. But we thought we could invite Siddarth because when we began the conversation, Siddarth was when he started the business, there's no terminology called startup. And he entered and he forayed into an area which many people may not even dare to do it, where he went into Wildcraft travel bags and travel accessories. And today it is one of the most established brand in India. And at this young age, he and Gaurav started the business. Today it has gone into a huge manufacturing base, creating employment generation directly and indirectly to so many people. And that's the reason we thought Siddarth, one, age-wise, he fits into all the startup entrepreneurs because any startup entrepreneur should be less than 45. If it is 50, he will not be called as a startup entrepreneur. So age-wise, he fits into it. Business-wise, he fits into it. And more than that, he created an organization, a manufacturing organization with a lot of technology into that, and we create a lot of employment both directly and indirectly, and is going for a huge expansion program. So we thought that we could invite Siddarth to address the startup people, mentors, and everybody. And knowing Siddarth very well, he can give an extempore talk. He's a more passionate about his business. I thought he would be the right person to address the startup crowd. Thank you, Siddarth, for accepting the invite. Take it forward, my friend.
Thank you, Ravindran and Shekhar. Thank you so much.
Siddarth, Mr. Siddarth, one second.
I'll just take
as you should. Yeah. Mr. Rupa will hand it over. We'll take it over now. Yeah.
Sir, may I now request Mr. K. Jairaj to say a few words about the startup clinic and your perspective, sir.
Thank you. Actually, I'm here to hear Siddarth, but just to add to the words of our president and our senior vice president, the BCIC is really very keen to promote entrepreneurship and a new kind of ethos in our country of startups. And I think we started in a very good way last year, Siddarth, when the first set of awards were announced. And actually, to cut a long story short, we discovered during the course of identifying successful startups that there were three issues that really we want you to focus on. At least I am hoping that you will focus on, and I know you will. One is, how do startups become sustainable? Because, they have a great idea, they want to roll it out, but post that rolling out, how do they really continue to build on it? That is the issue one. Issue two is scale. These are all problems of marketing and problems of cohesion, etc., that arise, which we saw really creates major obstacles for young startups. And the third is compatibility, and I use the word compatibility advisedly because it means, cohesion among the founders, discussion and some kind of consensus among stakeholders or those who work in the team and so on. So, the president and the senior vice president have been very kind to continue the startups, except that they have morphed it in a different way, which is that we have now the startup clinic, where, as our senior vice president said, several successful people are able to mentor and advise startups on how they can overcome these issues. So those are some of the words that I wanted to place before you, and I'm really looking forward to your contribution and your support for what BCIC has done under our president and our senior vice president and other very senior people here to promote this entire ecosystem of startups. Thank you for joining us, Siddarth, and look forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen. When Sekhar spoke to me about coming and addressing a call, I told Sekhar that I'm not I am not a big public speaker. I like to work under the radar. But Sekhar said, this is a startup community, and it's a great idea to just talk to the startup community. And for me, honestly, the last 14 years, and I'll take you guys through the journey that I've had over the last 14 years. I think, one area where I definitely think that, India needs more and more support as much as possible is definitely the startup ecosystem. Um, just to give you a little brief background about myself, I'm from Himachal, Shimla. I was born there, grew up there, did my education there, moved out for my MBA to Bombay. Did there, and post my MBA in the year 2000, for about 7 years, I was working with large multinational corporations. I was with GE in mergers acquisitions for some time. I was with Hewitt Consulting, mostly outside India in those 7 years. And while I was doing those jobs, me and my co-founder, Gaurav, he's my batchmate from MBA. That's where we met, professional acquaintances. We always used to, post MBA, like you get friendly with some people and you keep in touch. And we always used to discuss that, we can keep cribbing from the outside on how India is an underdeveloped country, employment is an issue, China is taking away everything, all manufacturing base, etc., etc. Or are we going to do something about it, right? And the idea of Wildcraft has actually, we started in the in 2000 when we just passed out of our MBA, but it was more of a hobby. In the year 2007, when Gaurav and me were, doing pretty well in our corporate careers, we had just both of us turned 30 that year, and we were discussing whether, are we going to take our entrepreneurial dreams with us to the grave, or are we going to do anything about it? Because we were getting relatively comfortable in the corporate jobs that we were pursuing. Sorry, I got muted. Yeah, so it came to a pivot point, where we discussed that we have to do entrepreneurship. Now, having taken the tough call of doing entrepreneurship in India, much to the dismay, I must say, to of our parents at that point of time in 2007, because they were very happy that both of us were outside India. We were doing relatively well in our corporate careers. They had seen the environment that the businesses, quote unquote, needed to face in India at that point of time. And obviously there was not the stars that are associated now with the entrepreneurial ecosystem in 2007. So there was a lot of debates, dismay of why we were quitting our jobs. Now, but having taken that decision and come back to Bangalore and said, we believe that the outdoor industry is an opportunity. We both of us had worked overseas. We'd seen the opportunity. We'd seen that in all the developed countries, people used to carry backpacks. We used to land at an Indian airport and see people carrying their stuff in polythene bags, in as recently as 2007. And we said, why would people in India not like to have backpacks? And I think that was the idea. And we said there definitely is an industry here to have. Even today, 14 years down the line, if you talk about the outdoor industry, we are actually the only Indian player in the organized outdoor industry play. And in 2007, when we used to use the word outdoor industry, I mean, I used to get blank looks from, whether they were bankers or whether they were people who we needed to believe in our story. So it was not an easy task. Like no startup is an easy task, right? So anyways, 2007 we came here. One of the first decisions that we took is that we will manufacture in-house. Now, this was contrarian to everything that we had heard and done in our jobs till then. Coming from a large behemoth like GE, where a large amount of manufacturing was happening in China and the Far East countries, this was a very contrarian call to say that we will manufacture in India, because I think essentially the two of us believed that if the employment problem, if the poverty problem has to be solved, entrepreneurs need to do it. It's something that needs to start from the grassroots. Even if I can generate employment for 10 people, I would feel happy about that. And I think, to one of the questions that Mr. Jairaj put, there, the sustainability, and I'll talk about scalability a little later, but, the sustainability comes on very early on what your beliefs are and why are you doing what you are doing, right? Money cannot be the only outcome. It's an important outcome. It's required. I'm not at all just going to discount the importance of, that entrepreneurs need to be paid well from their entrepreneurial ventures and all of that. But the sustainability comes from what is your long-term belief, right? Now, let me share with you in the year 2007, 2008, it's very easy now for me to sit in 2022, look back 14, 15 years and, paint the history in a very glorious light, right? But that time it's a struggle. When you are there in 2007, no one's ready to believe your story. It's very tough to have discussions on sustainability, scalability and all that, right? It's easy for someone like me to sit now and reflect upon it. But honestly, I think it is the 2 or 3 fundamental beliefs that we had. And everyone has to have different beliefs, right? It can't be one's beliefs on others. But why is it that you're doing your startup? What is your belief in your startup, right? For Gaurav and me, one of the things was that in the industry that we are going to be a part of, or the industries that are adjacent to us, like sports and travel, there is not a good brand in India, an Indian brand. The brands that we were consuming and continue to consume even today, Reebok, Adidas, Puma, Nike, none of them are Indian brands, right? So what is it that stops an Indian homegrown company to give good quality products in India? And why is it that Indians are not consuming an Indian brand? Why is it that Indians are looking up and aspiring to wear a Nike and a Puma and an Adidas and a Nike? And why are they not saying I'll go to wear Indian brand, right? And we figured out that one of the core elements, of that was the kind of quality that we were producing. As in Indian brands were producing, right? So one of the beliefs that we had is that we have to create a brand that outlives the two of us. That is going to be, like Adidas, Puma, if you read their history, these are 100-year-old brands, right? So there are brands that have to outlive the promoters. So, and we have to provide quality products in India. We have to generate employment in India. If we keep sitting on the side rails, we become entrepreneurs and keep saying we'll buy everything from China, how's the employment going to get generated? So I'm just telling you what are the few beliefs that over the years were very small seeds of belief, let me call it that way, in the year 2007. But over the last 15 years, because intrinsically from a DNA perspective, we believed in those things, our actions have reflected that in when we have gone to execute it. Now, if your beliefs are not there, if sustainability then becomes a problem, because every 3 years you start questioning. We've had tough times. We've had COVID last 2 years. We've had discussions around, we've created, people have come and told me in the last 3 years, see, we told you wrong strategy. You've 3,000 people. We told you if an event like this happens, how will you justify salaries and all that, right? But because we have belief in ourselves and because we know that we've done the right thing and we've executed on that year on year, our people have stood by us. We've been able to get through the whole, it's still ongoing, but the last 2 years without cutting down on people, without cutting salaries. We have one of the few people in the consumer durable space that has not had a single salary cut in the last 24 months. We've not asked our people to even take a 5-10% salary cut, because if that's what we are going to do to people, then that means that we don't stand by our belief of creating employment in India, and we are being opportunistic about the opportunities. So that belief in the early years, why am I doing my startup? Why am I doing entrepreneurship? What is it, that I believe in? I think that's very important for long-term sustainability of whatever you want to do. And if you really believe in that, even unconsciously, subconsciously, your actions are going to be reflective of what your beliefs are. And I think that leads to sustainability. I think the second important point, which was the third point that Jairaj made, but the second one that I will talk about, because then everything else I'm going to talk about is scalability, is the equation with people, co-founders, etc. I think, looking upon the last 15-year journey, I have a very clear view, and obviously people have very divided opinion on this. My view is very clear that you need to do this journey with at least one more person and not alone. And the reason I believe that is because the highs are such highs and the lows are such lows that if you don't have someone to support you through that emotion, and that support you're not going to find in your family. In the family, you're going to find a different kind of support. But with your co-founder and a professional co-founder at that, you're going to find a support to be able to be measured in your response even when you are in your highs, and be measured even when you are in your lows. When you don't have money in your bank account to pay salaries, how to come out of those situations. When you have too much money in your bank account, how not to go out and splurge it also comes out in those situations. So my core belief is that from a perspective of, and the way those relationships work and scale, luckily for Gaurav and me, we've known each other for 22 years now, since or 24 years now since college, and 15 years together working. I think one of the things easier said than done is keeping your ego in check. I think if you can do that and say that there is a common goal, there are common beliefs, and we are going to, therefore, it is not about me versus you, but it is about what is a legacy as two founders that we are going to leave. Are we going to make a brand in India that India is going to be proud of in the next 10 years, 15 years, and even the next 100 years? If that is the belief, if that is what we are believing in, then the me versus you, the egos and all automatically get shelved, and they become very small things in the entire universe of things that you're solving for. And the same thing happens with your teams and people. If they start believing in the purpose of the company and why the company is there is going to be, people will come, believe in the purpose, then they'll leave, and that is natural attrition. But I think very importantly that in the initial days, the initial set of people that you hire, need to believe in the belief. And I had a very simple test to do this hiring. It's tough. I know in this environment, it was tough in 2007 also. It was not easy. But, the first, I'd say 50 hires that we did, one, either Gaurav or me interviewed them personally. Two, without question, each of those 50 people took a salary cut when they joined us. Because for me, that was a test of whether these people are coming here to do the passion of what they want to do, or are they coming for the next salary increment, 10, 15, 20% jump that they want to get and move on. And for me, that core team of 50 people became so credible in spreading the belief. Obviously, we don't do that any longer. But those 50 people came in for the reasons of saying that for the young years, let me give you a story of my head of manufacturing today. My head of manufacturing is not even a graduate. He was an admin assistant in some building complex. Came to us and said, I want to do something different. I don't want to do a maintenance job in a building. And we gave him admin responsibilities. 2-3 years down the line, when he was working on something, he saw that we were having huge issues in production setup as we were trying to scale up production facility. He raised his hand and he said, can I go and handle production? And I said, what do you know about production? You've never seen a swing machine in your life. He said, had you seen a swing machine, Siddarth, 2 years ago? I said, no. So he said, you're running this business. Why can't I run production? I said, fair point. Go run production. Today, he runs a 3,000 member team, spread across the country, which does production. So, those are the kind of guys that you need to find. Those are the guys who you need to say how to make people like these young people. He was 25 then, now he was 22 then, he's 37 now. He was 22-year-old kid. No one would have given him any look or chance. And, we believed in that young talent. We said experience doesn't matter. What matters is your passion and your attitude. And I think when you're looking for people, I think that's the key critical skill set that I look for, which is, what is the passion and what is the attitude you're bringing, and your educational degree, obviously beyond a certain extent, until unless it's a technical job, really doesn't cut it with me. What cuts with me is your passion and attitude to your job. So that's, on the people side. But, coming to the scale and scalability, and the entrepreneurial journey. So let me remind, 2007, 2008, we went to bankers. We said, this is a working capital intensive business. We need money. They said, we need collateral if we have to give you money. And we said, listen, if we had collateral, we would not come here and ask you for money. And I think that time, this whole ecosystem, the venture capital, private equity, what we hear about now, was obviously very, very nascent in India. It was not even an option for a consumer good company for me to go and ask for that. So for me, the channel of finance was really going to banks and asking for it. And it was very heavily collateralized. But luckily for us, institutions like SIDBI, and, that is where I credit the government. We obviously give a lot of bad press to the government sometimes, but I'll give you two instances where I have really thought that the government has really made a significant difference to this, to where Wildcraft is today, where versus where it would have been in 2008. Sidbi approached us and said, listen, we have a special scheme for entrepreneurs like you called risk capital. It's an optionally convertible debt. It'll carry a high interest rate, but are you guys interested? And I'm telling you, the moment at which it came was like God sent to us. Even I'm a customer of Sidbi even today, and I tell them, that if you guys had not come in 2008 and told us about what are the schemes that you have, I mean, I would probably be half the size of what I am today. And the government had already started in 2006, 2007 thinking about what needs to be done. The second example of government is in the last 2 years of COVID, especially the first 6 months. When the lockdown happened, we are an outdoor industry. And everyone was asked to stay indoors in March of 2020, if you guys remember, right? And for us, it was more or less a death knell, saying that, if everyone has to stay indoors, how is an outdoor company going to sell, and who is it going to sell to? And, so we did not see what we were selling, but we actually evaluated in 48, 72 hours, what is our capabilities or the capability set that we hold in the organization. And very quickly we said, we are one of the few organizations in India that has a manufacturing base in India. We have 2,000, 3,000 people on our manufacturing payroll. We are used to working with technical material. We know how to do, certain technical operations in our factories that are not common in the apparel industry. We picked up the phone and shamelessly called everyone in Karnataka and Delhi, government and bureaucrats, and said, listen, we think we can make masks and hazmats immediately. And the support that we got in terms of opening of factories by 1st of April, when the whole of India was just settling to be indoors for the next 2 months, we had people, we had licenses and we have permissions to, run our factories, run our supplier factories, run our raw material factories, import material, airlift material. I remember, we were chartering flights and bringing in material into the country, all with the support of the government. When all the airlines and cargo planes were grounded, we got special permissions from the Civil Aviation Ministry to fly airplanes into India. And it was why? Not because I know anyone, or not because we were solving for a need. And, to a certain extent, which I always tell entrepreneurs and startup guys, you have to be shameless. If Gaurav and me had decided to sit home and, blame the situation of, we are an outdoor company and indoors has happened, and blame fate, nothing would have happened. We just said we were shameless. We were calling every bureaucrat's number we could get in Delhi and Bangalore, and we were saying we need help. And that is one of the traits I think, we all entrepreneurs and startup guys need to develop, which is the thick skin and the ability to hear no after no after no after no. Because when you hear so many no's, you are going to hear a yes eventually. Whether it is to do with your startup funding, whether it is to do with the quality of the people you're hiring, whether it is to do, a situation like COVID that I just explained. And for me, that is a trait, one of the traits that, I am not at all worried about hearing a no. What I'm worried about in my teams also, I tell them, is people not asking. Because that is more worrisome to me than hearing no's. I have heard, thousands of no's in the last 15 years. I'm not saying hundreds. I've heard thousands of no's in the last 15 years. And if I let those no's dictate, my journey and my startup experience, I would not be here on this call talking to you guys today. It is because I knew that after every 100 no's, I'm going to get a one yes, is why I'm here addressing you guys. And I think that's a very, very critical, skill set that I believe that, entrepreneurs need to have. The capability to have no and not feel deflated and not feel dejected. The other one, which comes from this is obviously perseverance. When you have a belief system of, sustainability, you have to persevere on the cause. If Gaurav and me have decided that Wildcraft should be a large Indian multinational brand, Indian company supplying its brand, not as an exporter, but as a brand available in countries across the world, then we know by definition that we have taken an objective that is going to take multiple decades to fulfill. So while we have to divide it into smaller targets and milestones, but even if you ask Gaurav and me today that, what do you guys want to do? Neither of us are going to tell you we want to do 500 crores or 700 crores of revenue this year. Neither of us. Both of us will say in the next decade or two, Wildcraft should be a globally recognized outdoor brand. Now, if you're clear on that, then you have to keep chipping away at that and execution. It might happen in my lifetime. It might happen after my lifetime. Who knows, right? But I'm very clear that something like that, eventually when it happens, that, people in US and Europe are consuming a Wildcraft product instead of a Nike or a Puma or a North Face is my journey. And that journey is a Wildcraft journey. It might happen in my lifetime. It might happen after mine, right? And that's the fun of doing entrepreneurship, Making money is a good high and it's okay, it's a bank balance. At the end of the day, most of us, 99.9% of us come from middle class upbringings. And I've told this often to my friends who say, you've raised private equity, you've never done secondary, why don't you sell some shares, put some money in your pocket, de-risk. I said, I can barely spend my salary with the middle class mentality that I have and the middle class upbringing that I have. Even if I had money in my bank account, I would be very hard pressed to, figure out what to spend it on, because that's how we've been raised. And that's what, so having that bank balance is obviously comfortable. There is nothing, I'm not denying that, but that can't be the belief system. That is not the sustainability, those are not the beliefs that will get you scale and sustainability. That are the things that will make you, concentrate on short-term objectives rather than long-term objectives, right? And therefore that's been my belief in perseverance and in the belief system. And the third most important thing, and a lot of entrepreneurs tend to forget this as they're scaling. And if some of you who might have done MBAs or even in college, you might have heard this phrase, but we never know when till we actually run our businesses. And it is called cash is king. Manage your P&L. You have losses on your P&L for 1-2 years during COVID. That doesn't matter. But are you managing your cash well? Because cash is truly the bloodline of the business. And a lot of people think that at every turn, someone will come and support me on cash. If there is one place where you need to be completely short-term oriented, is your cash. Everything else you can be long-term focused, but cash you have to guard, like, because if you run out of cash, your idea might be extremely brilliant. You might think I'm burning cash and at the next turn I'll be able to raise another 50 crore from a investor or a bank. But the day that investor or a bank changes its thesis on your sector or your industry, you don't want to be at the mercy of their decisions impacting your business, because they, at the end of the day, have to look at the benefit and the welfare of their business. You guys have to look at the benefit of your business. Always spend cash like, tomorrow is going to be an extremely rainy day. That razor sharp focus on cash for any startup is critical, because I would say 90% of the startups fold not because their idea was not great, but because the focus on cash was, wavering. It has to be completely unwavering. And I tell my team the same. I say, when you're cutting, don't worry about cash when you have to pay your vendor. You should worry about cash when you are raising the purchase order. Because if as a DNA in the company, you're segregating who's raising the purchase order and who's dealing in cash, then obviously you're creating conflict. So, what we've done is that the vendor front ending on cash payments will not be done by finance. It will be done by the people who are raising the purchase order. So if my raw material team is raising purchase order for raw material, they will front end the vendor and tell them why, if there is a delay in payment, why is there a delay in payment? If the marketing guys are raising a purchase order for marketing collateral or advertising, they will front end the vendor and justify to them why I need 60-day credit terms and why they can't work in 30-day credit terms. And what that brings is a huge alignment across the organization that cash is truly king. And the people who are raising the purchase order understand and appreciate that, I need to do an expense, and expense is okay as long as it's a budgetary approved expense. But if there is no cash, I will be answerable to my vendor ecosystem. And I think that has done wonders for our DNA. I think that's a practice that's, some of you in whose companies it works should definitely pick up. Because if you have cash, we have now gone through the last 24 months of COVID. Literally at times when we had no cash in the bank. But when I've gone to my banks, when you have that confidence that you know how to manage your cash and spend your cash, that confidence radiates to your banks. In the middle of the COVID pandemic, I remember in May last year, May 2020, last year, I went to my banker and I said, listen, I have a limit of 50 crores. We are doing these hazmats and masks. I need delta limits. And they said, how much do you need? And I was at 50 crores, right? And I said, I need 125. And they said, what is the justification for asking for a 125 crore limit? I had a call with their credit head and I explained to them. And I'm telling you, in 5 days, I had the credit limit approvals in place. It did not happen because of anything else, but it happened because over the last 7-8 years, the bank knows that this company knows how to spend its cash and it will not spend it. I ended up using zero of that delta limit that they gave me. Zero. I managed it within 50. But the bank was comfortable giving me 125, knowing that if I get 125, I'm not going to go and splurge the 125. But if my reputation was someone that who gets 125 and then splurges 125, let me tell you, I would not have got the 125. So it's a virtuous or a vicious cycle, whichever way you want to see it. And your reputation for managing cash is what is going to get you people, is what is going to get you investors, it is what is going to get you valuations, it is what is going to get you bankers on your side and suppliers on your side. That's a reputation you cannot afford to have a bad name on. I've taken my 30 minutes. I'm going to leave it open for questions and answers. I'm more than happy to spend as much time as is required on questions and answers. Thank you.
That's excellent, sir. That is very.
Thank you, Siddarth. Great one. So I have first question to ask Siddarth. Let me go first, Siddarth.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm in outside, so I'm with a mask. I'm masked myself. Okay. Siddarth, you went through the COVID times, and in the COVID, you did an innovation of doing something different. You sustained very strongly in the COVID times, despite the fact that the travel was not much. What is the secret being, and what is the innovation that you did during the COVID times with that? Why don't you share that perspective to all the members here?
Like I said, Jacob, the thing that we looked at is not what we sell, but what we are capable of doing. Right. And I think that focus changing from saying, what do I normally do as my business, to saying, what am I capable of doing, made all the difference in the eyes of the people, in the minds of the people that I have. More specifically, what we did is, because we are today India's largest manufacturer of rainwear. In Bangalore, we don't use so much rainwear, but in the coastal belt, for example, Goa, Maharashtra, a lot of raincoats and rain jackets get sold, because when the monsoons happen, the two people who are riding on two-wheelers, etc., or people who are stepping out, have a real risk of getting wet in the rain. And there is, in our times when I was in school, I remember the only raincoat option I had was a company called Duckback. And if you think about now, there is not a single organized name in the rainwear segment. And over the last few years, we've become experts at making rainwear, and we become India's largest brand. Now, when the problem of COVID came, what were people looking for? What were doctors looking for? What was the government looking for? A barrier that does not let the virus get into when the doctor is in proximity to a COVID patient, right? What is the answer to that? The answer is, when I can stop small droplets of water from getting in, I can obviously also stop COVID from getting in. So I focused on that capability. I told the government I have machines that can create rainwear. These are the same machines that can be repurposed to make hazmat suits. And overnight, the government understood it and gave me permissions to, start making hazmat suits, even before India had woken up to start making hazmat suits. We were still at that point of time as a country figuring out where should we import hazmat suits from. And we said, we'll make it here.
Siddarth, I have a question.
Great.
It was great to hear you speak about values, perseverance, and most important, managing cash well. We have a number of startups that are present today. And tell us a little bit, Siddarth, about the real life challenges you faced when it was almost at the brink and, people wanted to throw up the towel, and yet you said, no, let us stay the course. Tell us a few of those flashpoints, and what kind of learnings are there from those flashpoints?
Sure. Just way too many, Jairaj. But I mean, over the years, I can tell you instances in the initial years of Wildcraft. We never used to have money in the bank account to pay salaries, right? And every month it used to be a struggle. How are we going to pay salaries? There is no cash, right? And we had people who were patient with us, and we used to do the right things, right? For example, if I had 100 people, I would sort the payroll register, ascending order. And I would tell everyone, I'm not saying, this person gets salary first. Whoever is the least paid in the company needs to get his salary paid first. So so principally, no one could complain on a logic like that. That boss, जिसके घर में बिल्कुल मतलब जिसको 10,000 15,000 की सैलरी मिल रही है, उसको अगर आप पहले सैलरी दे रहे हो, no senior manager would come and say मेरी जरूरत ज्यादा है उससे. My need is more than his need, right? So it is also to see how you operate in those scenarios like that. Your team is very observant. They are not talking to you. but they are noticing what you are doing in those flashpoints, right? And the most important thing is, how do you keep that team as a cohesive team, right? There were so many times that, for example, we had a failed product batch. Now, suddenly we took a hit in the market saying that these backpacks have come out as defective. We were a very small company. For us, it was an existential threat at that point of time, because quality is something that we were priding on, right? I did not have the cash to do that, but I told all my distributors, please return all those products and we'll destroy all those products and take the loss in the company. Because I knew if I don't do it then, right, did I take maybe I don't know what, 30-40 lakh rupee loss at that point of time for that recall? Yes. Was it significant for the kind of balance sheet and P&L I was running? Absolutely yes. But was it the right thing to do? Absolutely yes, because if the trust in the quality was gone in 2009 from my product, and then in 2010, with what face was I going to go and say I'm going to make an Indian brand which was going to sell in the US and Europe, right? So that's the belief, and there are going to be things that are going to be against that, around that. For example, very early on, we decided on certain things. For example, we will do whatever is statutorily right. And if we are hauled up by authorities to say something is statutorily we've done wrong, we will go and pay the fines and penalties, right? The first time I paid those fines and penalties, my team said, you are the biggest idiot. You've come from US, you don't know how to operate in India. This is not the way to operate in India. If someone cuts a challan of 2 lakh rupees, you don't go and pay 2 lakh rupees. I said, I'm doing it because I want to do it, because the next time any of you guys do that paperwork mistake, you know that I'm going to end up paying 2 lakh rupees. I am not going to settle for 20,000 rupees, right? So therefore, I have a DNA in the organization that, once you've done that mistake, it does not get repeated again, because I pay the statutory fine and penalty. So in the long run, it is much cheaper for me to be compliant than not to be compliant. We always think it is cheaper to be non-compliant. It is never the case. It is always the case that it is, in the long run, over a decade, if I see, it is far more cheaper for me to be compliant than to be non-compliant. When people came, even before I got investors on board, I had some of the top auditors auditing my books, right? And people would say, why are you paying so much to auditors? You don't even have investors. What is the need? And I said, I don't get an audit done for investors. I get the audit done for myself. Because I cannot cheat myself. I can cheat anyone else. I cannot cheat myself, right? So I'm saying that sustainability belief that you were talking about, Jairaj, that has to be very deeply embedded, because all these calls come only when you have trust in that, right? So a lot of flashpoints, a lot of things, but I think people see the decisions you make, people respect the decisions you make if they are the right decisions, and people stick by you. And I think if people stick by you, you can get over any adverse situation.
Excellent, Siddarth. I have one issue which I will pose at the end on behalf of the Startup Clinic, but now we'll rotate the strike and ask others to chip in and ask. Thanks for all the inspiration, Siddarth.
Thank you.
Ravi, any other comments?
Yeah, Rupa, madam, please take over. Please take over controls.
Please.
Sir, Mr. Suresh Kumar has raised his hand, sir. Can we, I would request him to ask the question, sir.
Yeah,
You are unmuted, sir.
Yeah. Yes. Mr. Siddarth, very, very inspirational talk for entrepreneurs. Even though I have been in this field for the past 45 years, really, I got a lot of inspiration from you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Particularly when you said the cash is nothing but blood. In our early days, somebody used to say, when you are shaving, to cut your chin, what you do? Do you simply go on with the shaving, or what you do immediately? You see that the blood is stopped. So I used to compare this the cash with the blood. And the second thing is about your not the turnover, the brand thing. I think you have done a wonderful thing, and it's going to be a lesson for our lot of entrepreneurs require this kind of help, and particularly what you mentioned about the SIDBI and other thing. And Mr. Jairaj, who has been in the government, he knows about that the importance of thing, and he's still doing the thing. Hats off to you. Thanks for this talk.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Sir, I request Mr. Tiago Oliapa, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Yagu Valepa, past president, Bangalore Chamber. Siddarth, I think we had the opportunity to have Wildcraft in our warehouses in Mysore.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So I'm just off video because I'm driving somewhere next to Shimoga. So I'll just make it very quick. So I think it's a great brand, and I think you've created a new world of carrying bags as well as safety and things. So couple of quick questions. One is there is a famous saying, "What is brought you here may not take you further." So what you start with, and you need to realign or reorganize yourself periodically. I think that's a very important question for a startup because things are changing, and it's a challenge which they need to know. One, and secondly, are you looking at defense to go forward? And how Atmanirbhar Bharat is actually helping this? I think you had, in your speech, you had briefly said that the government policies are very favorable. And as we speak, a couple of weeks ago, there's been a huge thrust on, Make in India, as well as even yesterday's Prime Minister's speech in Davos, which, spoke about this. So just a brief on these 2 points.
Sure, sir. So the first one, I completely wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I even if you think from a 12-month perspective or a 12-year perspective, I think we need to keep shaping things up. One of the things that I did not mention, the role of the co-founders, and I found this very interesting. A lot of time people say you should do your entrepreneurship with people who are like-minded, right? In Gaurav and my case, we are like-minded, but we don't have supplementary skill sets, we have complementary skill sets, right? And the reason that helps, that complementary skill set, is because one of us keeps shaking the tree and the other one keeps managing that risk. Sometimes it could be Gaurav shaking the tree and me managing that risk, or it could be vice versa. But because we bring complementary skills to the table, that becomes a great thing for us to keep breaking things, from the continuity, so to speak, like you were talking about, that we get into. So I think that is also one of the values that I believe in the between co-founders, that definitely needs to be there, of the complementary skill set. And if one is in the easy coasting mode at some point of time, the other cannot also be in the easy coasting mode. He has to be the guy who's breaking the rules at that point of time. I think that is very important, and I think as co-founders, that is a responsibility on each of us to do that. On your second question, sir, very valid question. There's definitely a change. We've done business with the defense. I didn't talk about it. I should have. 2016, we received a call from Sena Bhavan, and and this is a true story. And there was a major general on the other side of the line, and he said, we are making rucksacks for the Indian Jawans. We've heard that you guys are the largest manufacturer of rucksacks in the country. It's a Make in India order. 30 people have applied for the tender. You are the only guys who've not applied. Right? What is the reason? He said, sir, we are not even aware, first of all, sorry. He said, come tomorrow morning to Delhi. Gaurav and me packed our bags overnight. We went to Delhi the next day morning. And he said, why is it that the largest manufacturer of rucksacks in the country is not tendering in one of the largest Make in India orders that we are doing with? And, we gave him our story of how we heard working capital horrors, working with government, and all the other miscellaneous stuff that goes with government execution. He said, listen, you can either keep believing like you guys are, the similar story that I told you guys, he heard us patiently for 15 minutes on our Wildcraft story. And he said, why don't you guys bid for it? If you guys at any stage feel uncomfortable, take your bid back. What eventually ended up happening is that when the defense teams came for capacity evaluation and saying that we want to really make sure that someone in the country can make 6 lakh rucksacks in a span of 1 year, out of 31 people who had bid for the tender, we were the only ones selected. All the 30 got disqualified. Now, the same guy called us and said, listen, I can't give you the award because if I give the award to only one company, it's a 240 crore rupee tender. There will be calls of favoritism and all that. So then they cancelled the tender, refloated the tender by saying that one company can maximum supply only 1/3. We won that tender. And just recently, last year, we supplied 80 crores of those rucksacks to the Indian Army. We had only one condition to the Indian Army. We said, you were buying from 3 people. That's okay. The other 2 were export houses, good companies. I'm not, and very clearly we could see the differentiation in how the procurement was happening, and even the other 2 companies that the order went to, I'm not cribbing about that. I'm saying they were great companies that those orders went to. They're capable companies. They're making rucksacks for foreign market, not for the domestic brand. My only condition to defense was that on the 1/3 of the rucksacks that I'm going to make, will have to allow me to put Wildcraft branding. They eventually allowed me to do that because I want the Jawan also on the border to be proud of carrying an Indian-made brand for, from India, as much as, a young consumer in college is carrying a Wildcraft brand. So I think that was a great win for us. As we speak, we are doing more projects with the government. For example, the government imports a lot of equipment, clothing and sleeping bags, etc., for Siachen, minus 40 degrees kind of thing. And we are trying to indigenize that kind of manufacturing, and they're fully supporting us and trying to do field trials, etc., of all of those things. So there is definitely intent on, the thing that you are hearing is not only rhetoric, but it is actually translating into ground. Now, but what happens with defense business is that it is cyclical in nature. So for a business like us, which is not purely only a manufacturing business, but a brand business, we see this as a source of revenue, but also appreciate the fact that, it can have highs and lows, because there can be a period where I've executed an 80 crore order, and then the next 2 months I might have to, 2 years I might have to sit without an order, and then some much other large order might come. So it is cyclical in nature. That is the nature of the beast. But there is definitely a move towards making in India.
Absolutely. So, thank you. I think you've made the Jawans wild and brought the wildness into the Jawans. But then other thing, Mr. Jairaj, just a small thing. I don't know how it's a right platform or not, but then the coronavirus or Omicron virus or any of these things which are particularly for that space, can we also moot the government to do a rapid speed passing, so that this could go into fast track thing? So instead of going in and doing it on from A to Z, if somebody's got solutions which is already up to a certain level, maybe we could add it on to the system by going through the required processes faster.
Can do, Thiago. We can take it up, and separately I'll talk to you, and we can approach the government. There are some progressive forces within the government who I'm sure will take note of it. So I'm happy to work with you on that.
Sure.
And Mr. Thiagu, last thing, I mean, that warehouse when we took in Hejala, it was a lifesaver. I mean, that was the first time we moved from what we used to call godowns to warehouses. And in our journey, when we saw that building, the first impression was, my God, this is a big building. How are we ever going to fill it up? And, honestly, the business grew big enough to be able to fill that warehouse in 12 months. So, but, you guys, when you came, was wonderful for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Siddarth. We'll be happy to meet you for a coffee and say from warehouse we've moved a lot. So maybe share a few of that as well.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
So, may I now request Mr. Ranjan Manish, sir? Please go ahead, sir, with your question.
Mr. Siddarth, it was indeed very, very inspirational. In fact, I am calling from Nagarjuna Group of Institutions, sir. So I just had one question: how to drive in the culture of entrepreneurship in a student? Because all of us know that there is certainty versus uncertainty. So when we talk about startups, the students are still very, very apprehensive to get into this culture. So what are one or two things which you can suggest wherein we can ensure that ecosystem within the colleges?
So thanks, sir, for the question. See, my take on students, I'll tell you my own student journey when Gaurav and me were together in MBA. Apprehensions are always there, whether they're your own apprehensions, whether your parents' apprehensions, because it is a risky journey. There is no doubt about that, right? So there has to be a conviction in what you're doing. And I think the best years to learn, which we actually wasted, are the college and the school years. The idea to take risks, fail, and not be berated for that failure. I think that's a cultural skill set that as a country we need to develop. That failure is okay, failure is good. Every time I fail, see, most of us don't do things not because we will fail, but we don't do things because we fear we will fail.
Correct.
Right? So that fear of failure has to be taken out of the education system. It is okay to go do a project and fail in that project, but at least I did that project and I learned 3 things from that project, right? So what stops us is not failure. Failure will happen. So big deal. In my last 15 years at Wildcraft, I might fail on certain things every single day. From small things to large things. If I start becoming paralyzed or crippled by the fear of failure, that is worse than failing itself. Which is what I was saying, you can't be afraid of hearing no's. So I think somewhere the students need to be inculcated with the thing of saying, put in situations where their fear of failure can be reduced. Because if that fear of failure as a country, as a society, we can reduce, and that thing of saying, I'll be ridiculed for my failure, I think if that goes away, I think the students will come out in droves and drive entrepreneurship.
Thank you.
So now I request Mr. Devesh Agarwal, our past president, to go ahead with his questions.
Siddarth, it was such a pleasure listening to you. Just for your info, I won the Lockheed Martin Innovation Medal back in 2008.
Wow.
So my focus would be actually just a quick response to Mr. Ranjan. I don't know how many people here are fans of the series Star Trek. There's a very famous sort of training module there at the Star Trek Academy or Starfleet Academy, which is called the Kobayashi Maru, which is essentially presenting students with a no-win situation and seeing how they cope with it. And it's more of, as you said, a test of leadership rather than a test of success. But the question that I had for you is, I'm seeing innovation in India. I mean, you are an exception, and which is why I'm asking you this question, that most of the innovation in India tends to happen around the service side of things. People are creating apps and things like that. It's not something in the physical space. And for whatever reason, the government in this country, as long as they can lay their hands on something tangible, they like to tax it and control it and regulate it to death. So what would be your mantra that you would give to the chamber that we can present to the government to say, this is how you foster product innovation and not just service innovation? After all, if you're going to make in India, then we need to have products to make in India, like you are making.
Absolutely, sir. So, Mr. Devesh, so one of the first things, again, going back to 2007, 2008, when we were talking about beliefs, Gaurav and me, we were sitting at a restaurant and we were saying, what are we going to focus on as a company? If we have come here, we've sacrificed our careers. What is it that we're going to do? And I still have that paper napkin somewhere of a restaurant. We drew a pyramid and we put 3 blocks in that pyramid. And we said, these are the 3 things we are going to focus on. At the bottom of that pyramid, the first thing that we put is research and design, right? The first thing, because somewhere exactly what you were saying is what resonated with us, that if we are going to be a product company, if we are going to be a brand, then research and development has to lead that effort. It cannot come from sales. I cannot just give a sales guys a copy of a North Face backpack, reverse engineer it, make it in India and say, isko jaake becho. What is it? That is going to be research and development. So for example, very early on, when we hired accessory designer, and that time accessory design was also not a big, stream in NIFT like it has become now. What we figured out is that the Indian body structure, I mean, everyone knows it, but, in terms of how a rucksack works, we figured out that the Indian or the Occidental body structure is very different from the Caucasian body structure, right? So when you wear a rucksack and it's putting pressure on your spine, it is the way it has to be made for the Indian population is very different on how it is to be made for the European population. If you wear a European rucksack and climb as an Indian or do a trek, you are going to be 100% uncomfortable because they have they are taller in height, and therefore where the pressure goes on your spine is at a different area from where it should go. Now, something like that, you have to figure out, do research, design, development, and do it, right? Now, what we've done is we've obviously invested in that, irrespective of whether, the government was encouraging us to do it or not. We've invested on that. We today have, in the consumer goods space, which is where we operate, arguably one of the largest development and design team in the country. We have about 60 members, in the consumer durable space I'm talking about, 60 members who work exclusively only on design and development. Now, would I want that number to be higher? Absolutely, yes. We do material engineering. We talk to our factories in Korea and say, can we put this kind of a chemical on the fabric that you're making so that it makes the fabric more waterproof, but also, makes it breathable. So, we try and test those challenges, both in our own in-house manufacturing as well as for the raw material that we do. We've honestly not leaned on the government too much for any support like that. But if the government can obviously, some of the some of the laws that we have, for example, in research and development, what can you capitalize, where do you get tax and benefits and all that, are very gray. So we don't even go in those areas to say कि boss यहाँ पे इसको हम tax free benefit ले लेते हैं because we are investing in research and design and all that, because the last thing I want to do is defocus myself and get into a gray area of litigation. So if some of those areas were made a little more black and white in terms of what is defined as R&D in the tangible good space, like you said, the products that can be touched and felt, and very black and white rules on what is classified as research and development and design, and what are the kind of benefits that organizations can get around that, I think that will be a big fillip to the startup ecosystem.
Thanks. That was just one of the things. Jairaj sir, I think this is something that we have to look at, seeing how we can take the experiences of our startup members, and in this forum, and help government shape their policy, because we have to focus on that element of making products in India. Rather than we are not trying to become a substitute for China. We'll never become a substitute for China. We have to develop our own products for our own market.
Absolutely, Devesh, you're absolutely bang on, sir, and we will work on it, and also try to see that the experiences that startups have can also help in shaping policy so that the ecosystem can improve. But Siddarth, following up on what Devesh has said, can I ask a quick question?
Sure, sir.
So, how did you develop the mindset to become a risk taker? Because you came from what you described as a middle class background, right?
Yes.
How did you, and a middle class background, I'm familiar now with higher education, and most young men and women who come to college, engineering colleges, want a good job, gilt-edged job. So you spoke about how to create a risk-taking ability in students. So tell us a little bit about what you did.
I didn't do anything, sir. I didn't do anything overtly, let me put it this way. I think two things, when I look back upon it, I think there are two defining factors I can, place in my becoming a risk taker. I think one was obviously, my dad runs a chemist shop in Shimla, it's a business, small business family, small business, right? So those dinner table conversations around this, where I used to find my excitement when dad used to be describing his business, howsoever small, right? That used to be a trigger point for me. I don't know, whether it was DNA wise or whether it was just something that I enjoyed or it's something that I got hooked onto. I think the second defining moment came when I when I met Gaurav in college. And I think he also came from a very similar background to me, small city boy. I was from Shimla, he was from Meerut. We met in a big city, Bombay. Both of us were completely lost in, what we are doing in this big city. And I think somewhere, as we were discussing and talking, we figured out that a lot of our batchmates also had this, 98, 2000, this, startup, the first dot-com boom was happening, way back then. We were in college. There was this new world that was happening in the US, Europe of dot-com and all that. And we were sitting in India and, on the nascent days of the internet, reading about, what's going on there. And I think that kind of triggered a curiosity that what is it that these guys in the developed markets are doing? And, why are we still talking about sitting in placements and getting jobs? Because these guys seem to be on a completely different tangent of what they are doing in life. And we seem to be still, running after that job. It was not an easy decision. We still took jobs. I mean, it was easier to read it on the internet and the newspapers. We still took those guilt-edged jobs, like you said. I was placed in GE, Gaurav was with Standard Chartered Bank. We did that for 6-7 years. But over those 6-7 years, we realized that our real interest and calling was somewhere in that.
We don't
May I
want
request people to can I request you to mute the phone,
please
Yeah,
mute
okay.
your mic.
Please mute. Please mute. Go ahead, Siddarth.
Yeah. So somewhere there we realized over those 7 years when we were doing jobs that, that passion that we had for what is now called entrepreneurship, was burning alive. And we were while both of us were doing phenomenally well in our careers, in very senior positions, but it was not fulfilling and not satisfying to, what we wanted to do in life, because that risk taking capability, let me also just link. I think it is also on how we, it also comes from your background, let me say it that way, right? So, were we ever penalized severely for making mistakes when we were growing up? The answer is no, right? And I think I made a lot of mistakes when I was growing up. Whether it was in school, whether it was in college, whether it was my choice of subjects, what I thought I wanted to do versus what I really enjoyed, right? And every time I came back to my family and said, listen, I think taking sciences for me was a mistake. I don't think I have it in me to become a doctor. I want to go to commerce. And I was already, 1-2 years into the science stream. I think them saying, okay, if that's what you want to do, do that. If you end up wasting a year or 18 months, it's okay. I think, those things told me that, what I was mentioning, the fear of failure versus failure alone. Just because of the fear of failure, I could have continued and become a doctor. I can guarantee you I would have been a very bad doctor if I had become one.
Super. So I wanted to ask Rupa. Rupa, how long does this session go on to? Because there may be other questions also.
Jairaj, we need to close. There is already one more than an hour. I think it's time we need to close.
Then, Shekhar sir, I have just one more point to request Siddarth, and then I'll conclude. Siddarth.
Yes, sir.
How can you help our startup clinic in BCIC, which has really started by all these esteemed past presidents and Shekhar and Ravi? What can you do to help us?
Sir, I will answer not diplomatically, but straight away. You guys tell me how I can help. I'll tell you yes or no. If you tell me, for example, I'm telling you where skill sets are, right? For example, over these years, I've figured out, how to raise funds. Someone asked a question on the chat box, how did you arrange seed capital, right? If there is a specific topic where people want to talk about, how, we spoke about cash, what I know about the Indian banking system, what's a good way to approach the Indian banking system, what are the kind of schemes that I'm at least aware of the Indian banking system gives for entrepreneurs. More than happy to do it on one-on-one calls or over emails or over a chat, right? If there is a question around, we want to understand what kind of product design development you've done, more than happy. If you ask me, Siddarth, we want 8 hours of your time in a week to come and spend here, I'll tell you no. No, I'm just telling you. So as happy as I am to give you yes answers, I'm also very blunt to give no answers, right? So I'm just telling you, so like I said, you ask me questions, maybe most probably you'll hear a yes, maybe you'll hear a no. So
that's very generous of you. Over to Ravi. Ravi, please wrap up because President has said we have overshot.
Thank you, Siddarth. Very inspirational talk. The final few minutes from Ms. Rupa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Siddarth. There is no doubt that it was very enchanting, inspiring address from you, and we do have a lot of key takeaways from your address, and we do look forward to your support in our startup endeavors, sir. And I thank you once again on behalf of the chamber for addressing our members, sir.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love talking to startups. I think that's one thing where all my energy also comes out, as you would have seen in the last 1 hour. It's an enjoyable session for me. And thank you so much for having me here. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Siddarth.
Thank you,
Siddarth,
sir.
my friend.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much.
Thank you, Siddarth.
Great.
Devesh, and catch up soon. Namaskar.